So this is
Workshop?
a workshop, do we have to call the meeting to order or not? I mean, I didn't know.
It's, I think, no,
Don't you? That's Sarah knows.
Sarah, do we have to call this meeting to order?
No, because it's not like.
Okay, so we don't have to say
you don't have to do
anything.
anything official
I
like
think you
that.
can just say the words, we commence the work.
All right, so, all right,
With this hand.
so shall we start with the very well printed and organized junkyard by Mr. Clark?
I'm just trying to show you what, Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
You supply this, I supply this.
Well, I know, I mean, it's just, you know, well, first of all, does anyone have any comments on Tom's hard work here?
The only one that,
Or Tom yourself, do you wanna make some comments? Let's
well,
start with
we had some email exchange with Michelle, and I'm not sure where, she said that the junkyards, it's prohibited for junkyards to expand, which, I don't know where that says, but, we have, this provision is copied from a different municipality. So on A 8.26A3, the area occupied by junk at any time shall not exceed by more than 10%. The area occupied by junk on the day, we could just do that, right?
Yes, please.
Yeah, we'll just say that the area shall not be expanded or increased.
I think that the inclusion of that is almost, it almost condones growth. When, you
Yeah.
know,
But it's the nature of the business. If it's a junkyard, you know, you have vehicles coming in, going out, you have a high month, you have a low month.
Sure.
I mean, when you say expand, not as purchasing, abutting neighbors and building additional buildings, I see that one definition of expansion. Or should you say expansion of the inventory that is on site?
I think
Because
it's
the
more
nature of
about
the
footprint.
business,
Yeah, I think it's the
so
area.
we're just talking building, right?
Oh, the area footprint, like if he's covering whatever, 40,000 square feet with junk, he can't go to 42,000 square feet.
I see what you're saying, but we have that blurb, the blurb that's in there is the 10% expansion. I think that,
I think what blurb does is basically cover.
so you're talking
the
about the outdoor storage space, or
Yeah.
the area, the density of the lot itself being
base that's being covered, right.
increased.
Right, I think this covers what you're getting at, is that there's an allowable flexibility that says you can, if you have 40,000 square feet, you can add another 400. But then, I agree with Caroline, you know, I just kind of copied this, but if someone starts creeping up, you know, it'll just get larger and
Well,
larger.
you have it subject to renewal every year,
Yeah,
so every year in the sense that
yep,
you'd be able to tell if there was growth.
yeah.
Okay.
So is the proposal that we strike, the 10%, section in Roman, or 8.26A, Roman 3?
Yes, and I'll put in some languages that cannot expand.
Okay.
So at the bottom of that page, B, it says that junkyards not legally operating already have to first receive the recommendation of the planning board and the conservation commission. So I would first add, they need special exception or variance from this, sorry.
Yes,
Because it's not allowed in any district.
right.
So they need to go to the ZBA, so we should add that first. But under what circumstances would a conservation commission ever condone the creation of a new junkyard?
I don't know, but I think what we need to think, are there others?
No, not legally operating.
Well, okay, so are there illegal ones? I mean, we're talking, you know, the guy in
That's a
Rollins
fine
Road.
line, you know, I
Yeah.
guess you'd have to define that.
There's little
So-
stuff, well, we have a definition on the top. It doesn't quantify it, so I mean, if you have 3 or 4 cars that are in tough shape like he did, or 5 or 6, however
Possibly,
many he
I think you
had.
could argue we have others. Not licensed sanctioned ones.
Yeah, So that would, B would be that, right?
Well-
Legally operating? But it
Well,
also-
yes, but you still have to add ZBA because they're never gonna be legally operating. They're never gonna be licensed by the select board unless they
Yeah.
first go to the ZBA.
But it also says may be licensed.
Well, still, they may not be licensed by the
Yeah,
select.
yeah, no, I'm,
But I still question the point of the Conservation Commission because, you know, junkyards are such a potential environmental hazard, even if run to, you know, state standards in as much as they have to. I just think that's a really fascinating idea to put that in there because it just sort of shuts the whole thing down right there.
I think it's just another bar, right, that they have to,
I just think it's not an achievable
But
bar.
on what grounds would the Conservation Commission approve or deny an application? I mean, they don't have the expertise scientifically to say like, it will affect groundwater. I mean, you need to have a scientist to do that, not a group of
Right, so what is the
citizen
goal?
volunteers.
I think it's just to open up to review by as many people as possible.
How would it hurt? How would it hurt? How would the inclusion hurt?
I just think that there's no way that a Conservation Commission would ever sign off on it. So if the provision is in there because it allows the potential for another junkyard to be licensed in the town, really it doesn't. It's a backhanded way to actually never allow it because, you know, although the composition of a Conservation Commission can vary, generally the kinds of people who would serve on a Conservation Commission are never going to feel as though that kind of operation is aligned with the mission of that group.
So what if, I'm just thinking out here, so let's say that someone wants to put in a junkyard near a historic site in Rollinsford, would it be appropriate for the Conservation Commission to chime in? Is that what it's intended for?
I just think that you're never, ever realistically gonna have a conservation commission buy in to a junkyard just because it's a hazardous environment. And I think that it's an impossible hurdle, but regardless, you still have either ZBA approval, selectmen, planning board. I mean, I think there's enough sets of eyes looking at it. You know, I think the you can leave it in there, you'll
Well,
just.
I'm thinking I think that's a good point. If we just get rid of B, and if we run into an example of another Rollins Road or something, it's existing, it's a land use violation, and if the guy wants to make it legal, I mean, we don't have to say in this, you have to run through the whole thing. We say, if you get a variance to do it, then you have to run through this, the condition of approval by the zoning.
Well, that's all the process anyway, so you're right, that if you take it out, it just becomes what is already the known process,
Yes.
which is essentially the same thing
Yeah.
without the Conservation
Yeah.
Commission.
I have to ask about the definition of junkyard and that these materials are bought, sold, and when I go to the transfer station, I mean, they don't have, you know, stuff bought and sold,
Yeah,
but it looks like a junkyard to me,
it is.
so I'm
But
trying.
municipalities are exempt from their own ordinances. I mean, we try to do, you know, we don't want to do as I say, don't do as I do, but, I mean, if we have a transfer station,
Why do we allow junkyards? I mean, that's my purest
Well, we really don't
way.
allow
We don't, that's the
junkyards,
whole-
you know,
yeah.
they're not allowed in the
Yeah.
zoning ordinance, so they only exist currently as a non-conforming use. So there is quite a hurdle for another one to ever become allowed, in that they have to get a variance from the ZBA.
Uh-huh.
So there's already that hurdle.
I mean, they could call themselves a secondhand shop and clean up. I
Well-
sound very
well,
oblivious
no,
about
this-
this.
this is good, devil's advocate is good.
It is good, but it's, you know, if they're getting close to, I think that's why it says all this about bought and sold and stored
Yeah.
and baled and whatnot. You know, if it looks like you're operating like a junkyard and you're not, then that offers us the opportunity to enforce it as a non-licensed junkyard.
Oh, okay.
So the definition is important so that, you know, I guess it would align with housing standards that if you just seem to be having a lot of stuff and you have hazardous conditions because you have an enormous amount of things that fall into that definition, then we can bring that to your attention and say, go to the ZBA and go through the process of licensure or cease and desist.
Okay, I just was like, all right, I look at the transfer station.
But the
I
guy
look at
that
the
just has
junker.
2 or 3 junk cars outside of him, his car, and if he wants to say, well, I'm not a junkyard, I'm not trying to be a junkyard, then we can enforce the housing standards. If he says, I am a junkyard, well, then he has to become a legally licensed junkyard. That's when his,
I'm not sure there's anything in housing standards about junkyards.
Well, not
I'm just talking about a guy with 3 or 4, with
Just
junk
like the
outs,
unlicensed
junk in his
vehicles.
yard, junk in his
Yeah.
yard, for lack of a better term. I mean, that's not permitted either. Is it?
If not what?
Let's say you have a guy out there that has junk in his yard, cars, you know, parts,
Yeah,
and, but he's not trying to be a junkyard.
then,
But we should be able to go out, I mean, you can't just have 3 or 4 junk vehicles in your yard in Rollinsford.
Right.
And I mean, although there are places that,
Well-
we've seen them,
we try to, yes, we try to act on them as we come across them, but it's just like the guy in Wallingford who's
right?
kind of cleaned up his act, well, for the most part. The way we pursued him, it's not in here, but we just said it's a violation of the zoning order because it's not an allowed use. It's not listed as an allowed use, so it's not permitted.
But then if he was to reply, well, I'm not trying to be a junkyard,
Then
I just have things in my yard.
he has to clean up his act then.
Show me but his response may be, under what ordinance am I violating?
We're saying, by definition, it's a junkyard.
So that's why you wanna have a definition
Oh, we
here.
have to have, yes, yes.
But does this tie too closely into it being an operating business, where it says bought, sold? What if I'm just keeping stuff in my yard?
Well, it says or,
But
it
it's got-
says or.
So you think
So
that
if
covers
you're doing
everything?
any one of those
It's got,
things,
yeah,
If
yeah,
someone just wants to dig their heels in
yeah.
and drag out the process, it'd be nice to have
Then-
either your junk, if he says I'm not trying to be a junkyard, I just have junk in my yard,
Right.
that we have recourse to.
Yeah, we had,
Cease
I
that.
think we was stumbling a little, because there's a provision in the zoning ordinance, it doesn't exactly say the table of use regs, it doesn't exactly say junkyard, but it's what we use for the Rollins Road guy. And it just says, open lot storage or sale of junk or salvage materials.
So open
that's
lot
all we
storage, that
have.
covers,
Yeah.
that covers that.
So, we're essentially saying,
Then
we
if
don't have
that's
a
the only
definition
thing
of
we
that.
have to go at someone who has the cars in their yard, wouldn't it behoove us all at this point in time also to, I mean, if that's all you have to go after someone,
Yeah.
you know, and,
We would, I think what we would do.
I'm
is
just
we-
thinking if someone wants to dig their heels in and, you know, really divide the words and nitpick and do interpretations of this and that, and/or,
That's
are
certainly
we
gonna
protected
happen.
that way? If we're
That's
gonna do
certainly
it-
gonna happen, then we just have to get legal involved, which we did.
At our cost.
Oh, yes.
always.
But if it gets to the point, it goes to the judicial thing, then we can ask for, attorney costs and all that other stuff. But the guy with Rollins Road, he just kept dragging it out, we kept sending him letters and all the rest of the stuff, and I'm sure it costs
But
stuff
I'm
illegal.
trying to learn from that experience
Well,
for the next time.
Going with a gun and, I mean,
No.
yeah.
What kind of better process are you?
I don't know, I'm throwing it on the table there. It just seems like, the guy that just wants to store things outdoors haphazardly, he's not buying, selling, trading, it's just his stuff.
Well, we can point out to
For it
him
to
that,
become that long in the tooth, and as long as that one's drawn on, if there's
Yeah.
any way to better protect the situation from duplicating
we
itself.
could point out that the term junkyard does not include uses established entirely within enclosed buildings. So if the guy wants to build a garage and put stuff in it, fine.
Well, that takes it out of the public nuisance,
Yeah.
the problems with
Yeah.
the abutters and, but that's not the case with some people, clearly.
Then it's up to them to bring it into compliance. If we say it's a junkyard and they say it isn't, we say, until you go to a judge, we're right.
Okay.
It's up to the town to
So
sue
we'll,
over
we
something
have,
like
the
that.
so we can defend our position of saying that's an illegal junkyard, and that's,
Yeah. Yes.
that's why we're doing the cease and desist.
Yes,
Clean it up, you know,
yes.
like terms, you know, a program of compliance.
But you don't think that reads, and I'm just throwing the questions out there, that reads too much as this being a business versus the guy that's not a business, I just have the things in my yard.
I don't think so.
The
It's
word
bought,
You
it's
put
bought,
or in
it's
there.
it's bought, sold, exchanged, stored, baled, packed, assembled, or
Or
it-
handled.
it's not just bought and sold.
It
If
could
you
just
just
be
have it
stored
there.
and packed, or stored and disassembled, or stored and handled. Any one of those. So it depends on the extent of which, the extent of which whatever it is going on will determine whether or not it's egregious enough that the town would choose to take action over it.
And the other thing, what we could do, if we don't include that new section and just include the new definition and put the definition in place of the open lot storage, wouldn't the same thing? Because we do have the license required by the select board, so,
It's always better to have regulations than put it in the license.
okay.
Such was the advice from the municipal association.
Okay, yeah.
So the minimum is we definitely need the definition, but I would err on the side of putting the whole thing in the regulation, because then it is not, specific to one circumstance, but we're making a broad statement about how we feel about junkyards and how we wanna regulate junkyards. So I think it's a good idea to have a whole
Yep.
provision
Okay.
in there, if not its own separate.
So do we want to get rid of B? Down at the bottom of the first page. We would keep, I guess we would, no, we would get,
We're not getting rid of the whole
right.
section, we're getting rid of the commission, the conservation commission?
Well, so if you remove it, then you're removing I underneath, or Roman numeral 1, which the whole 6-month,
Yeah, which is, but we want to keep the Roman 2, pursuant to, right?
Yes, I think.
so then I think the easier thing is to leave the whole thing in there and then to get rid of the Conservation Commission. Would accomplish the same.
Could you word it so that the select board has the option to send you to the conservation commission at their, if they think it's suitable? But
From the
not
planning board
required, but
and
at
perhaps,
the, at
Well,
the.
no, yeah, well, the planning board could always say to the applicant, it needs review by the Conservation Commission. Because the thing is, Conservation Commission is just advisory. I mean, they're not regulatory like planning, et cetera. So if the planning board said, we need some input from conservation, certainly the option at
But
any time.
If you word it so that it could, the select board or the planning board has the license to have the review of any other board they see fit.
I think, yeah, we can do whatever we want.
Is there a need to say it when the ability is already there?
I don't think so, because if we just say,
It's already under the purview of either board, the
Yeah.
select or the planning,
yeah,
at any time.
so if we just get, receive a recommendation from the planning board, and provided they meet all the, we just, yeah. Then the planning board can ask at whatever time to, yeah.
Yeah, we gotta add zoning in there. Before, first receive a, you have to add variance.
Okay, after having the first,
From ZBA. Then recommendation from the planning board. Well, I wouldn't even say recommendation from the planning board, I would say site review.
review, yeah,
I-
yeah.
Where'd you get these from, Tom?
Deerfield. The guy sent it to me, was from the municipal association, and we asked for him, and this is the one he sent, so
All right,
that's the one I used.
okay, I was just teasing.
So going back to the Conservation Commission, so might it be related to the fact that there can be runoff from,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just looking at Dover's Conservation and Commission, and it says, for the purpose of developing, protecting, and promoting the natural resources, so, and for blah, 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 the watershed resources of the city, so I'm thinking whatever municipality came up with this, because I know that one of the issues with the current one is the issues of effluent or whatever you wanna call it, going into the Seven Falls River, so isn't that the basis for why the Conservation Commission, the other municipality probably put that in there?
I can only assume so, I mean, that's their purview. Make those kind of recommendations and reviews, and it is just, I mean, it's just whatever they come up with, it would just be a recommendation.
But we're not giving up the right to have it reviewed by either the select or the planning board. Anyone can suggest that. In the site review, I mean, all that's, once again,
Yeah.
Well, and so maybe if it didn't say recommendation from the Conservation Commission, I just, I can't imagine, that's a troubling word for me, because the
Okay.
Conservation Commission isn't gonna recommend that there ever be a junkyard, but at the
No.
same time, they can make recommendations in ways that you implement a junkyard to make it environmentally better, perhaps.
So how about the junkyard's not legally operating, may be licensed by the select board after first receive a variance from the zoning board. And
Then site review.
site review, yeah, from the planning board, which may include review and comment by the Conservation Commission. So it's not a
That's much
recommendation.
better.
Yeah.
Because if they come back and say, we don't like it, it's still just advisory.
Well, and I think it's worth getting their opinion in writing.
Yeah.
Let me just, thank you.
So Tom, I looked at RSA 236:122, and the annual fee can be as high as $250. Why don't we pick 250 versus 250?
That was one of the things I was gonna suggest, is that we need to review that $50. I mean, right now it's only, is it 25 or something? It's-
No.
Is it 50?
I think it's 50 annually, it's I think 250 for new ones or something, but,
Yeah.
for annual renewals, it's much lower, but I was gonna suggest that we take that out of there because this can only be revised at the annual meeting and instead
Oh,
put something in there that, fee
Right.
set per RSA, by the select board and just give them the discretion to set the fees.
to get the dollar amount, up. Good idea.
Again, because the statute reads, the annual license fee is not more than $250 to be paid at the time the application is made annually thereafter, in the event of renewal.
It might even be 250 already, I haven't,
Oh, I didn't,
it's,
oh, it's- Let me see, I just happened
I think it is 250, Caroline.
Say what?
I think 250 is for the junkyard.
it's, I think it's more.
Is that online anywhere?
It's not in regs, it's in their license.
This says a license renewal, this is a copy of,
Last year's.
yeah. License renewal fee of $50 per year shall be assessed by the town.
Okay, so then the new one, it was a,
Right, so we're not gonna allow a new one.
well, right, but I think the new one is different and maybe you got hit with it.
Okay, so you've already increased it, is what you're saying.
I'm saying I don't know, is what I'm saying, but at least you figured
But-
that, at least you got us closer to that, but I
Okay.
think if we just
So we'll
take the
take, right,
dollar amount out, then
right.
at least we're not locked into
Yep.
that.
We wouldn't be locked in at 250. You're saying put the dollar amount out.
So we could put it in as 250 if we want it to be 250, I suppose we could max it out. I just thought that whatever you put in there, the law may change, but you're tying the hands of the select board to set the fees. Which is fine, if you just want it to be 250, we can certainly do that.
We could say up to 250 in this, and then let the select board
Well, but even if you say up to 250, if that RSA changes, or if it becomes pursuant to a, you know,
Yeah, I think you're right about, if we get rid of the fee from the zoning ordinance, because, yeah, it'd be, like, we could have the fee in subdivision site review regs, because that is entirely under the authority of the planning board to change, so, and it doesn't require going to town meeting.
Or you can give the select board
Yeah.
the authority to set the fees
Yeah,
pursuant to RSA.
I think that's probably a good idea.
Okay.
I'm thinking about the testing fees that is mentioned here.
What?
The select board, it says, the discretion of the select board, appropriate investigations of each license
Oh.
may be conducted prior to. The testing fees that will be incurred if it's so decided, is that something that the applicant would be responsible for providing or the
Yes.
town?
No, we're saying you have to do this, we need to see the results, and they have to pay for it.
Okay. And that's clearly understood.
Oh, yes,
If we ask for them, they have to pay for them.
yes.
Is it worth putting it in there, though, that, you know, at the applicant's expense or at the,
We can put whatever we want, yeah. I mean, it's,
And why not? So in other words, at the end of toxic substances, comma, at the applicant's, at the sole expense of the applicant.
sure.
And we don't have to address things like non-permeable surfaces, because that's all site plan, right?
Right.
So do we need to make a motion to say that we
No,
want this to?
I think if we did a workshop.
you can do it by consensus, you can't really vote in the workshop.
Ah, okay, fine.
We get to be informal.
All right, so are we ready to move on?
I'll just review, I mean, redo this, send it all out again.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
So next is my thought, and I'm ready to happy to be vigorously debated on this, is my proposal for a new zoning district, scenic countryside.
Okay.
Scenic countryside, so we would amend 3.1 to add scenic countryside. Purpose of scenic countryside in 3.2 would be to ensure the integrity of natural open spaces and scenic view sheds for the betterment of the community. And under 3.3 scenic countryside, I described the area that it would entail.
Is that Bear Road?
Is that?
Bear Road?
Yes, Bear Road.
Very descriptive.
Well, it's probably overly wordy, but, you know,
No.
and I looked at the way the other districts were
Yeah,
described, and that's how I came up with it.
yep.
So, are cluster subdivisions
What's that?
allowed? Are cluster subdivisions allowed in the scenic countryside?
I don't know.
And if not, how do we remove that? I guess we would have to revise the subdivision.
Well, it's,
I don't know how they're tied.
and it's in the zoning ordinance too, clusters. And it's, I think it just says in the. I thought it was just limited to the,
What page are you looking at, Tom?
page 53 of the zoning ordinance, where 8.7 open space cluster subdivision. I thought it was just the CR.
So you know you have other rivers, well, so you're referencing, under your special exception, this 250-foot setback from the Salmon Falls River. There are, other brooks and rivers, in town, and maybe, they don't warrant 250 feet, but they flow into the Salmon Falls, and so they may warrant some kind of significant setback if that's your intention.
All right, so you're suggesting that I would need to add other smaller water bodies.
Well, like, so, you know, if you like that 250 feet from the Salmon Falls, I would just add, you know, some other number of feet from other named rivers. I wouldn't name the rivers, but from other, you know, rivers that have names. Like, if they're big enough to have a name, that's a silly qualification, but, you know, find some other way to define other bodies that flow into or are a watershed into the Salmon Falls River. So I guess my point is that we are we're a stormwater community, an MS4 stormwater community, and all of our riverways are impaired and they all ultimately flow into the Salmon Falls River. And so while it is noble to want to protect that river, the protection, even if to a lesser extent of any other river, will also ultimately assist in the protection of the Salmon Falls River.
So setback from the Salmon Falls River in all waterways leading into the Salmon Falls River? I don't
Well,
think
but
you
at the
can
same
define
time, if
waterway.
you have such a huge setback from all rivers, you're gonna have like, you know, 0.3 acres in the middle of countryside residential that is developable, because there are other waterways back in there. So I don't mean for it to be overly burdensome either, because, you know, essentially, you're gonna end up with, you know, not really allowing development at some extent if everything is an enormous setback. It's just something for consideration.
Okay, I'm happy to hear thoughts.
And I did find in the table of use rate, permitted uses A14. Permitted uses residential open space area cluster development, so it's allowed in UR, SR1, SR2, and CR.
So it just won't be allowed in SC.
If we, right,
Okay. The other thing is, in your special exception thing here, you've got, it does allow for single-family homes, but the state law says that anywhere that you allow single-family homes, you have to allow accessory dwelling units.
Oh, accessory dwelling units?
Yes.
I have no problem with accessory dwelling units.
Okay.
works for me.
Well, I mean, give me some feedback on this proposal. I mean, people can say they hate it, they.
I like it.
You like it?
Yeah, yeah, keeping the,
You know about
having a
it?
new,
But,
proposal to keep the scenic countryside.
Yeah. I think it's certainly a valuable asset. I mean, if we go down Bear Road, or my wife and I, we drive up, we look at this open land and think, where else is this?
Exactly, exactly.
And it isn't. So I think
Is
it's a great objective.
Is that the same road where for sale signs have been put up?
I believe so.
Oh,
Yes.
And I agree with the value of the open space, but, you know, I think a little bit about, you know, landowners that may own property in these areas and, you know, leaving their rights to develop as they see fit, or, but even beyond that, sometimes land can be developed in ways that generate more taxation than other ways. And, you know, clearly a big thing in town is taxation. I mean, you know, we're supporting ourselves here, and, you know, you know, we all love Route 4 being, you know, commercial or anything like that, but I mean, I have to really weigh in the fact that, you know, change is inevitable, and development is inevitable. And, I don't know, I would have to give it some thought if I was to say a yea or nay on my opinion of this.
No,
You know, that's just where I'm coming from too.
I hear it. And actually, the idea behind this in part is to maintain value, that I think that, and it's not prohibiting development, just it has to meet certain criteria here, and, you know, comparing my small raised ranch on Caris Drive, produces a lot less taxation than a larger lot in the woodlands, the town. So, I don't know, like I said, I'm happy to have this shot down or whatever.
I don't think it's about shooting it down, I think it's about recognizing all the ways in which it's gonna affect all the things that it's gonna affect. It's, I think essentially the people who already live here would love it because it does protect the open space to a greater degree than what we have. But it also promotes gentrification because people have to afford a 5-acre lot instead of affording a 15,000 foot, well, in this zone, it would have already been a 2-acre lot. But, so you're making, you know, there's kind of an expectation, I think, in the way that this is written, that the homes that would be developed out in that area, should development, when they happen, would be bigger, grander properties. And you're still gonna get a development, but you're just gonna get a more spread out development with a 5-acre minimum and no cluster subdivision. And there's no need now or no provision for the cluster subdivision, so there's no benefit, if you see the benefit of a cluster subdivision with that conservation land set aside. So, it doesn't help with the regional housing crisis.
But it's anticipating this argument for me, but how many people let's look at Oldenburg Lane, what are the houses they're starting at?
Oh, like 400, 450 or
So,
something like that.
who is coming to the town and saying, we want to build houses for $150,000?
Well,
for
you're
people?
absolutely right, you're
So
absolutely
who's doing
right.
that?
Well, nobody's doing that, because, you know, it is the nature of development that people will always develop to the highest potential of the land and to the highest profit of the developer. I'm just putting it out there that there is a dark side.
And then let's think about like workforce housing, like no one, let's say we create, I don't know if you need a zone for workforce housing, but no one's gonna build workforce housing in Rollinsford because there's no public transportation.
Well, and there's still not, even if there was, they're still not gonna build workforce housing because it's not as profitable as what you have here. Or even like a cluster subdivision, you can sell more homes in a cluster subdivision than you could with this. So I'm not saying that you're absolutely right, that already we're not the place for that necessarily, but I just wanted to point that out, that it's not, the point of a cluster subdivision, whether you like it or not, and we have it in our regulations, is that it allows for a denser use of the land in order to allow open space, so that you have less sprawl. So I'm not saying that this is a good thing or a bad thing, I'm just sort of exploring all of the other perspectives about it. And so my only, you know, like I said, I think that most people who currently live in Rollinsford would favor this over what we already have. But it does disable some people's property rights to some degree because you are diminishing their development potential. So I think it's just worth having a, just dispersing we already disperse information as much as we can, and we'll have a public hearing anyway. But I think it just really requires as much public input as possible to be sure that it aligns with public values, because, you know, I would be hesitant to make a zoning change when our master plan is so out of date anyway, except that I do think that you're right, that probably most people would want this and agree with this, and it does align with the old version of the master plan.
And how does the uploading of the master plan coming?
It is miserable, I will
Okay,
tell
so,
you.
I mean, and again, I'm not gonna be sarcastic, but
No,
we
but,
can't- I can't, we
but,
can't
yes,
stop doing things
Agreed.
because we're waiting for this map, and I'm not trying to put it on you or whatever, but it's an obstacle that I don't see progress being made on, no offense, or I can't see putting off proactive thought just because of that. I
I
can't.
agree, I just think you need to we need to compensate for that with, you know, the loudest public hearing one could have, is all.
And, you know, zoning ordinances zoning by its very nature restricts property owners. I mean, that's the basic. And this is something that comes from a public hearing, and it can be shot down, you know, it could be my little idea here, could be shot down in flames. And I'm not suggesting that I'm right on this, and I anticipated Kevin's comments and yours, but I'd like to throw it out there I'd like to put it on for the public hearing, and, you know, and maybe I'm gonna be proven to be all wet behind the ears, or wherever the expression goes.
I'm just curious, like, is the process to create a new zoning district as simple as proposing one and putting it down on paper?
Well, it has to go through, it's a revision of the zoning
It's-
ordinance,
Is
I think,
that
like any
it?
other.
Yeah, if you wanna add,
So you have a public hearing
Oh,
and
yeah.
you vote on
yeah,
it?
So there's not like surveying that needs to happen or anything like that?
it goes through all the hearing processes, but it's not like what needs to happen?
Like, survey of the land or
Oh,
anything
no,
like
no,
that?
no.
You do.
And I was
have
actually
to-
surprised at how basic if you look at
Yeah,
the definitions, how basic they really are.
yeah.
This is your copy, by the way, Carolina, I borrowed.
Okay.
But like the zoning map is so constructed, I mean, it just seems, I mean, do
Yeah,
any
just-
of these,
You have to
do
have-
these, any of this proposed zone take away land from other existing zones? I mean, it does, doesn't it?
It would, yes.
So, I mean, you're like, it just seems crazy to me a
Well,
little
you're-
bit that it's like so
I think
like,
it's a little more complicated, you're right, that, I mean, we would say this, but the amendment in the ordinance would have to say, you know, we're changing anything in, whatever, the S1 to this, and, so yeah, there's a little more work, but you just have to identify it, I mean, that's something, it doesn't have to be surveyed, we just have to identify the new boundaries and the new zones.
And we would be creating, new nonconformities. Which is not necessarily, you know, a bad thing, but just to note that whatever pre-existing structure is likely to
Sure.
meet these new setbacks.
No, there'd be a lot of non-conforming uses.
Yeah.
That's bound to happen anytime you make it done.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
yeah, that's par for sure.
So I would like to see, if you would, there's a zoning map in the back of that, and if you
Mhm.
wouldn't mind,
Highlight.
like drawing what you think this represents.
And I actually tried to, I couldn't hop on the town internet. Sure, I mean, I
It's at the
don't
very
like
end.
draw it on this, on your booklet, but,
That's fine.
I mean, that's awfully small anyway, it's kind of hard to.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Right,
think
so,
you're,
so yellow is the country residential, and I think it seems as though you would be, everything you're proposing is within what is currently the yellow country residential zone.
Yes, I think so, I think, I'm just trying to think, this is so,
Just tiny.
well, so, if that's the case, then why don't we just rename CR to country
Well,
residential?
that's true too.
Country.
well, no, because this goes well beyond, I mean, I'm carving out a much smaller
Oh.
section
okay.
within.
So
I'm
it's-
not taking this whole yellow
Okay.
and making it scenic countryside, I'm taking basically,
Got it.
I can't even quite tell on this where I'm doing this. I almost think that's a better thing to look at, even though it's
No.
older.
No, it's a much bigger
Do we
one
have-
than
do we have
Caroline's
a-
office.
A thing with on wheels and.
stick, I don't know how to stick it up on a wall, but at least you can look at something bigger, you can see street names. So here's Bear Road,
Right.
and here's Roberts,
Mm-hmm.
and there's General Sullivan and Pinch Hill, Route 4. So you mentioned this intersection here with Roberts Road and Route
Mhm.
4.
So I think we're talking, so,
Were you talking about like, this strip? But you mentioned something also about Sligo, about the river, Salmon Falls. So were you talking about like everything from Bear Road over? But,
well, see, I sort of wanted to do something along, the scenic, the view sheds there is what I wanted to protect.
okay,
I mean,
so,
I think I've got to describe my boundaries better.
well, yes, but I think it would be really important to have some kind of visual representation for people
Absolutely.
so that they can
Oh,
see
yeah.
Absolutely.
what's changing.
So when you were mentioning General Sullivan, you weren't including it, right?
No,
Yeah.
I just was trying to do an endpoint.
Start, yeah. So you're not really taking anything out of any other zone other than the CR.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah. That'd be easy enough.
Well, so I guess I'm still trying to understand, are you just trying to take like this intersection and do something like, some, distance on either side? Because like you say, it's about the scenicness, but then you're totally breaking up that zone and leaving pockets of stuff that's not in that zone, but then you also mentioned the river, so I guess I'm still struggling to picture what's changing.
So I guess I had thought about, and again, I only worked on this, got here at 6 o'clock tonight, is something like carving out areas that, almost like a cross, if you will, in the middle of the country residential.
Because the problem with that is that you need road frontage to develop. And so you're taking all the road frontage, which means you're really, even though you're not directly impacting these areas that are not along the roadways, you're indirectly very much affecting them because they don't have road frontage. Although I guess you could still build a road into them if you were going to anyway.
How about if we consider just doing CR to 3 acres, split the difference? And
I think it would be much simpler if you did something like divide this and
Yeah.
take everything like over there.
yeah,
Even though that doesn't protect, an area that I would imagine you're trying to protect. But I think it simplifies the defining of it and the understanding. If you do something like what you're suggesting, then every single person has to like figure out how far, they have to, it sort of increases the burden in figuring out what their zone is. You're splitting lots more properties into multiple zones than if you divide it by the
I
streets.
think we then get back to Sarah's concern is that, like, you wouldn't wanna run it through somebody's lot, it'd have to be on the lot line.
Well, that's
That's
what I
what you're
mean,
saying,
that's why
yeah.
I'm thinking that if you follow like streets and have streets be boundaries, then you're not so much breaking up lots, but you're taking entire lots. But then you're restricting your intent in a.
I mean, I could live with a smaller, again, this is just an idea that
Yeah.
I've never,
The other thing is, even if you minimized it somewhat, like if you took everything from these streets over plus, 400 feet or something, if, whatever you could do to minimize the cutting through lots with a
So-
zone change.
let's see, we did Old Mill Lane to, let's say we did that. We decided to do, well, I wanna go down here though.
Well then, okay, so what if you took Old Mill Lane and went entirely that way?
So Old Mill Lane entirely this way.
Yeah, and it would include that too.
Sure.
but-
And then, but you're saying leave the north side of Portland Ave alone.
Well, that's the compromise, is that you lose.
Well,
like,
sure, I mean,
roads.
I would be willing to consider a smaller change than that.
I guess,
Although that's one of the more important,
well, I
Scenic.
guess that's my concern, is that whatever you're doing, you're trying to protect something and people, I think there needs to be public input on what are we trying to protect.
well, sure, that's why we have the public meeting. here,
Well,
right?
Right, so, I think it's just, I just think it requires an extensive public engagement, not even just public hearing, but a public engagement kind of process over something that's so significant.
I think it's be pretty clear that this wouldn't be a one and done thing. I mean, we bring it up, and then at the public hearing, I'm sure a lot of people are gonna trash it. It has to be revised. I mean, I don't think it's just gonna happen, especially now, between now and, what is it, January, is it have to be?
We have to, our meeting on the 9th is the public hearing, and we have to have the warrant finalized very soon after that. So there's not a big window for discussion and revision.
We have Monday the 13th, don't we?
So,
That was a,
so we have Thursday the 9th. Thursday the 9th is the next planning board. We moved it to Thursday.
Yeah, but wasn't there, when's the public meeting?
Well, so that is the public, so it's a public hearing followed by the planning board meeting where we do have some cases on the agenda. So we're just starting with the public hearing
On the
Um,
9th,
on the 9th.
and then the 13th?
I don't know anything about the 13th. Now I'm confused.
I just have it in my notes for the 13th. Maybe it's a school board, or, I
It
don't know.
might be a school board, but typically there are not town meetings on Monday nights other than select board because the select board typically meets on.
Yeah, I don't mind it. What they're saying is they want, as I understand, they want roads as the boundaries,
oh,
is what they're saying,
that would
right?
make it a lot easier.
It would make it a lot easier.
You know, we don't have enough time. If it's between now and then, when the warrant article, I mean, this is something I think that would take review and,
I think whatever you do, you're gonna have public input that, that it's a great idea, but it should be somewhere else. Or that, there are those in town who would rather have lots of houses, believe it or not. I just think it warrants a lot of discussion about what area is it really, because all of that is worth protecting for different reasons. Some of it is less visible than other parts of it, and so yes, there, with the scenic part, the scenic countryside, there is something to be said for how that would inform where one would put it, but, I think it's complicated.
It's not a this year thing.
Well, I don't think, it's not that it can't, I would say it probably wouldn't get well defined in time for this March. That doesn't mean necessarily that we couldn't try if you wanted to try, but I think I would just caution your expectations and understand that it's probably gonna be a longer drawn out process that might inform the following March.
So what would be the harm, and just thinking, what would be the harm of starting, so we gotta start a process, it's a long process. So let's say we put something on for the public hearing, and if nothing else, doesn't that move it along, even if it doesn't?
Well, right, it starts with a conversation, and that's where it starts, is a conversation.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that.
and the other thing is, too, now that I think about it, isn't it the state law that if you post a change, then people can't come in, even though it's just posted and not enacted, developers can't come in and say, yeah, but I still want to do what's allowed by the CR zone. you know what I'm saying? Like, we would post, this area is gonna be scenic countryside.
So it freezes,
Yes, that's exactly this, yes. I think so.
that's dangerous.
Huh?
That's kind of dangerous.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure,
Well, so we have to be, well, okay, so, while that's interesting and compelling, and some people would really love to do that, I also, caution us to be obstructionists.
pick a side.
I think it's worth conversation, and I would propose bringing it forward to just see how people feel about it.
Yeah.
But I would encourage you to identify what area.
So why can't we, so Tom is going to refine the language for the junkyard between now and the public hearing. Why can't we put it on for the public hearing and I refine the language
I think that's
in
great.
description between, do I have to say today what the exact boundaries of scenic countryside would be?
No, I would say, but just be ready to define it and to defend your definition, but
Okay.
also to be able to, put a colored piece of paper right
Sure.
over the spot that you're designating so that people can visually
All right,
understand.
so I would like to do that. I want to start the process. Even if
All
it
right.
doesn't succeed, I want to start the process.
Couldn't you pick an area and then in the future expand that if you needed to?
Sure, I mean, everything can always be amended.
Yeah, but I think it'd be easier to go the other way.
Yeah, that's true too.
Ask for too much and then say, okay, I'll narrow it down to the.
Professional negotiator, are you?
I was president of
All right.
that union for over 14 years.
I guess you were.
so that's-
Pick this whole area and then scale it back.
Well, I'm gonna come up with a better description, so, all right. So do we need to say, do we need to?
I think the consensus of the group, I think the consensus of the group is have at it, and we'll see what you
Okay.
come up with for the
Great,
next.
thank you. Thank you.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Do we have any other proposed amendments?
Thank you for taking the time to be thoughtful and to write that up, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness
That's-
and.
Well, I just wish, I feel, I mean, I would have tried to had something on impact fees also, but I have just been out straight in this, it's a horrific, I don't like to make excuses on what it is.
That's.
So let
really-
me ask you this, so
that's-
do I have to actually have impact fees? I hadn't put anything up, bring it up. Can I still put out for public hearing and come up with some language between now and then?
I don't think you really have to worry about the impact fees are already in the zoning ordinance.
Okay,
It's the amounts
Okay.
and figuring all that stuff out.
So that's more just procedural, that doesn't
Yeah.
have to do with revising the.
we don't need to do a warrant, that
So-
has to be a warrant, that's just part of our, okay,
It's
So in other words, I
already-
think we can implement that at any time,
okay,
Yeah,
once we have good forms and process.
okay.
and administrative staff.
Well, yeah.
What'd you say?
Administrative staff,
Yes, yep, okay.
finance department, establish a holder.
But the option to close it, we already have.
Yes,
You just have to manage it,
and know how to manage it and.
establish it.
Yeah.
as far as
have a
fee
process,
schedule.
Have, some policies that help us understand how to do it.
Okay.
But that's not reinventing the wheel, lots of other communities do that, so it shouldn't be.
No, I agree, and,
Yeah, well, it is certainly a lift to figure out the paperwork, to figure out how to administer it. And, I think that still the bigger hurdle is the actual administration of it. But that's not to say it's not worthwhile, so I
but you
would
see,
still.
if we increase the junkyard fee from 50 to 250, there's little things, we increase the operating budget we have. And increasing the annual fee for using the transfer station.
Well, transfer station that's a whole other bag of work.
I'm just trying to be
Well,
forward.
there's a huge benefit to having impact fees. I mean, it certainly help in, growing your infrastructure, absolutely. I mean, it'd be great to have. It's just,
So what's the
you're
next step?
obligated to handle it properly.
So what is the next step for me bringing that forward? I go out and, versus
I would say find
pilot
another.
from another town and just sort of take it and cut and paste. Not literally cut and
Yes.
paste, but take their format and then bring it in here and change amounts and,
Well, right, so I guess I guess what I would wanna know, or when Dover says that the fire impact fee is $2,000, for example, how do they come up with that number? It has to be based on something. So we're gonna have to do the
It's-
same.
I think it's spelled out how.
Is it down to that? You have to prove it. And
Sure, no,
so-
I'm not trying to be
so-
arbitrary,
Well, no, I understand, I just, if we are gonna carry that out, then we in the office need to know how to figure that out. So do you take, you're gonna need, the 60% of another fire truck, and so you take the cost of that piece of equipment, and then you divide it by, I'm not really sure. You know what I'm saying? So we need to know how we come up with numbers, how we do the math to figure out what exactly is the impact. And then once you know what the impact is, how do you divide it among, how do you make a fee out of that? Because, you don't know if you're gonna get 200 houses out of that subdivision, or 50, or 12, because every developer will have a different idea of how to approach that. So what do and so it's not even a big development that gets the impact fees, but it's any building permit for new construction. So it has to fit with whatever might come in for new construction. So how do we wrap our heads around, what are we charging, that we can do across the board?
Yeah, the planning board has to adopt such studies or methodologies and related fee schedules that provide for a process or method of calculating proportionate share. It's outlined, it doesn't say specifically,
Right, we've gotta do it, is
Yes.
all.
And what
so-
section is that, Tom?
it's section 13.2 in the zoning ordinance, starts on page 86.
Okay. All right. Logan's been very patient, and I appreciate that. Am I allowed to correspond with Tom, and if I come up with some language and say, am I allowed to do that? Use him for
Absolutely.
that purpose?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and thank you, because I agree that it's worthy of discussion and investigation, and we don't really know how heavy the lift is until we start moving in the direction we're moving. So,
Well, I'd rather be on the side of trying to anticipate change than versus being,
yeah.
change happen, and change is gonna happen, I do recognize it.
It's good, thank you.
All right, thank you guys for your patience coming in on your evenings away from your family.
I have a
Oh,
yes.
question.
Sis.
No, go ahead.
No, it's a whole different question about some of the cases earlier this year that there have not been a history of, I was thinking of Dr. Bennett's property, where there's a large building, and I guess it looks like a barn, but so far as the history of it, the permits or what was going on there, it doesn't exist, or, it's just very old. And I wanted to suggest if there could be like a cutoff time of looking for older information, because it just seemed as though some of the progress, well, just using that for example, I mean, there was others that maybe the applicant wanted to move ahead, but they had to, find out about the permits of that large building, and which really, I think the person went ahead and built what he wanted to build. Yeah, so,
I know, that's exactly what happened.
and, yeah, so to have like a uniformity of, say, well, the number of years have gone by that, I hate to say, but we have to move on, and with the applicant's information.
So are you suggesting that something didn't go the way it could have gone because, that you have a new owner of a property where something didn't happen the way it should have, and so that there were implications for the new property owner that perhaps shouldn't have been? Is that what you're suggesting?
Oh, that, with the new property owner, it did happen that it was a little delayed, but it was like not necessarily delayed. It just seemed as though just a few examples of the records are so old or did not exist. And I was just hoping that we could just have say a cutoff of time of, well, we didn't know what happened from then on, and then move on. Hope I'm making a bit of sense.
I think you have, one of the things though, on the barn, for instance.
Yeah,
In this whole process, that barn's coming down.
yeah,
So,
okay.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of moot point then.
In
that case,
But I
yeah.
see what you're saying, if, I'm trying to think of an example here. Nothing's popping in my head.
Most of the reason that that barn came up in discussion through that subdivision proposal is because the applicant wanted to, at first, infringe upon the river setback as much as that building already did, but in a different way.
The river, I
Right.
realized to do with the river.
Right, and so the problem with that argument is that it was never allowed to happen in the first place.
Mm-hmm,
So we do keep building permits
okay.
when people file building permits.
Okay. I
But in a
just-
sense, the sins of the seller are not the problems of the buyer, though.
But they are not the enablement either.
Almost.
Correct. They do not grant permission.
Right.
Right, do not grant permission to the new.
Yeah, I think the sins of the seller, I mean, if the buyer inherits that, and we say, this happened, for instance, this happens all the time, people finish their basements, then they sell a house, then the new guy wants to sell his house, and at this particular time, the bank comes in with an appraiser and they said, there's no permit for finishing the basement. It's that owner's responsibility, it's not the guy that did it. So you do, you know, if you assume ownership.
Well, yes, if they, that's establishing the value of the collateral for the money it's lent, sure.
Yeah, if you assume ownership, you assume
Well,
responsibility.
the buyer would have to bring into compliance any errors of the property at the time of the sale.
Or, no, the seller would.
The-
So I say, I finished my basement 20 years ago and just did it. And then 10 years ago, I sold it to you. Now, the banks are much more focused on this kind of stuff. So you want to sell it, and the appraiser says, yeah, but it has a finished basement and there's no record in the town. So you, the owner, the current owner, have to rectify it.
So
And me,
that's what I mean,
as-
by correcting
Yes,
the
yeah, yeah.
deficiency, sure.
it would be whoever owns it at the time it is discovered.
Right, but chances are that would come up at time of the sale transaction.
Lately, yes. I mean,
Because the
back,
tax
20
card
years
review,
ago,
the
yeah.
gross living area, there'd be
Yes,
discrepancy
yes,
there.
yes.
I'm just thinking like what you were saying, if this, whatever the situation is with a property, whether it's, I guess you could, well, I'm just trying to think of,
Yeah, I can't think of it.
you know,
I know.
encroachments on setbacks or things like that. If the buyers, I would think at the sale transaction, that's gonna come to light. If, you know, once a survey is done or,
Exactly, yeah.
yeah.
There were circumstances, I mean, way back, where people would build too close to a lot line, because we never required certified plot plans after construction. So it would come to light at the sale, and then we said, oh, you have to go to the zoning board for variance for that setback. And the zoning board's not gonna say no, and
It's
you have to tear down
existing,
your
right,
house.
yeah.
So, there've been, we use certified plot plans, and the zoning ordinance, the zoning regs have been changed so that there's now a provision called equitable waivers, so that if we find this circumstance where the house is too close, it's not a variance, you can go for an equitable waiver saying that this happened however long ago, and you have to make sure that it's, you know, it wasn't done on purpose, and,
Right, no malice. no-
yeah,
I
yes.
understand that. So I think that we've got situations like what your concern is, Sue, covered, because in most cases it would be
Most, yes.
divulged at time of the transaction
Oh,
going
okay.
place, whether it's a
People are
bank
being-
seeing
yes.
value,
Sorry so much.
it's an appraiser
Hey,
seeing.
can I call you back in just a minute?
Thank God we got that on tape.
My wife, the ID on my phone is sexy mom is terrible, I'll say it's terrible, sorry.
Oh, you got the light flashing at the same time?
Well, you know why I did that is because, you can set it that way because, occasionally I put in very long nights. I only get like 3 hours sleep,
Oh.
and,
Yep.
the flashing And sometimes I have court the next day and I'm worried about oversleeping. Now, I've never overslept for a court hearing, but the flashing light is an extra, gives me a sense of comfort at night.
Comfort, certainly gonna be a long.
Where's
Jump.
sexy mama in the
Yeah,
mornings when you
yeah.
gotta get up?
Well, she actually,
Out?
on average, she leaves more workers than I do. believe it or not.
Simply interested.
I guess I have to change that at some point, but it's been her idea on my phone for so long.
I just have a couple of things here.
All right.
In the zoning ordinance, we talked about other little changes, and Caroline mentioned the painting thing.
Yes,
So, that does say, it kind of excludes painting, you know what I mean? But I
would
think
you
it would
mind
be,
reading that paragraph?
Yeah,
For
I know.
everybody?
no, it's under enforcement. Yes, page 84, no person, about the permits. No man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate, including but not limited to buildings or other structures, mining, dredging, filling, grading, paving, excavation, drilling operations shall be commenced until a separate permit has been obtained. This is Board of Selectmen. I mean, it's,
Or designate?
no, I have an old one, I guess.
Oh, yes, you do, okay.
So anyway, except that maintenance, painting, and repairs to existing structures that merely replace existing structural materials shall not require a building permit. So it doesn't really say if you paint, it does require a permit. It says, it shouldn't be,
Yes, exactly.
if we just delete that one word, I think that,
Can you say again what section and all that?
oh, sure. Section 13.1. And it's the first paragraph. So if we just delete, except that maintenance and repairs to existing structures, painting, we just delete painting. Right?
Yes,
Oh,
yeah, I think that covers it. I think that covers it.
and
I just wanna, I guess I just wanna, I think it's worth talking about existing structures, you know, replacing windows, replacing things that are already there, you replace your deck boards. If it's still more than $1,500, you need a building permit?
well, that was
Is that
something, I was
fair?
gonna, you want to increase that. That dollar amount is pretty low.
Well, that's not even the point, and we can discuss that, that's worth discussing too, but it's more about, do you really need a building permit for something that's already there?
No, except if it's a structural change.
Structural
Because-
changes, yes, I just
Okay,
mean, you know, it seems as though the way it's already written, if you replace your windows, if you replace your roof, you know, those don't really have value as far as assessing is concerned, it's just fees.
right.
So,
There are, most, as far as I know, most communities don't require permits for
Right.
re-roofing.
right, I guess I just would like to see us align more with what's reasonable according to what other communities require. And other communities seem to not require replacement of existing things.
In some,
Some certainly do, you know, but we seem to be more restrictive.
yeah, like windows, for instance, you could do a one-for-one swap, you know, with size of a window. But the energy code requires now, you know, double pane glass, et cetera. So if you take out an old window, and even though the value of that one window might be less than the 1,500, a permit still is necessary because it impacts something in the building code. Same thing as structural. I mean, if you have joists that don't support the required live load and you want to replace them, the new ones have to. So if you're going to replace a window that's ancient, the new window has to meet the current regs.
Can you see how a window would get replaced and not meet current regs? I mean, I suppose it's possible that you, like, go find a pretty
Yeah.
used one from the
Yeah.
ReStore or something, but, you know.
Yes. And, you're right, it happens all the time, and nobody gets them, and,
Well, it's not even that nobody gets them. I don't wanna condone bad behavior. I think it's just more about, you know, if we need it because we need to verify code, you know, that's worthwhile. If,
Yeah.
you know, for any reason that we need to verify code, that's worth getting a building permit. But otherwise, if it's not structural or otherwise, you know, relative to code, it
Then-
just seems to be about fees and it's burdensome.
then, yes, I agree with you. If it doesn't relate to code, then yes.
So how can we revise the language so as to?
I think we increase the dollar amount, because if you're gonna, say, take up your deck boards and replace them, that's not really structural, it's just maintenance. You know, they're old, they're split, you wanna put, you know, take a regular lumber, put down pressure treated. It would be difficult to do that, depending on the size of the deck, of course, for $1,500. So I think if you increase this dollar amount,
Well, should we, but I guess my point is more, shouldn't we just allow people to replace their deck boards and they might have a really big deck or a small deck, but they're replacing something that already exists that's not structural?
well, we don't wanna, I think, get into that kind of description. We get
The language is too,
too deep, you can do this, you can't do that, you can, I think that's why the dollar amount kind of cuts across the whole thing.
which I
The automatic kind of
suggest.
covers is a better way to do it, because it's a finite number, it doesn't apply, I mean, it doesn't matter how big your deck is or what quality material you're using,
Yeah.
it's just a
Yeah.
dollar amount, it's unbiased.
So would
So
you like
what
to
would the dollar
suggest?
amount, what do you suggest the dollar amount be?
2,500.
Okay.
I can see that.
Okay,
So we get rid of painting and we increase the cost to 25.
Was that in the same section?
Yes,
Okay, same paragraph?
yes.
we haven't really been talking about this, but we don't seem to have a definition of a butter and,
Right. I agree with what Sarah wrote in that email. If we just modify them to go with the state.
did everybody get that?
I didn't see that.
Oh,
We don't have a, we don't
I
have a
didn't.
definition for an abutter?
Not in zoning, we do in site and,
Okay.
subdivision
Yeah.
regulations.
Yeah.
But there's some discrepancies on the applications that I think could be easily clarified if we just included the butter.
right.
Is
And
there
it's
like an industry standard description?
There's a state,
State regs,
State
yeah.
standard.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we should definitely be doing that, although you can, I'm pretty sure Dover has a wider area when it comes to site review, you know, they figure, or subdivisions, they figure more people will be impacted than direct abutters, so they do have a radius of 200 or 300 feet. So I mean, it's not illegal to have it, but we should be consistent. We have it in one, but,
Well, you just said not to be consistent.
what?
So you just made an argument for having a bigger radius for subdivisions because they have a bigger impact.
Oh, I meant, yeah, consistent from the ordinance to the application.
Well, okay, except that, to what application though, because subdivisions, you know, more abutters than,
Yeah. I'm just saying that whatever it says in the subdivision regs should be on the subdivision application.
but what about site plan though, I guess?
Whatever says in the site regs should be on the site review application.
it says, I reviewed both of them today, and they both go with the state definition of a butter, within the regulations.
Oh, so we should add that to zoning,
Mhm.
and then it's consistent,
That
right?
Yeah,
and then change the application to meet that same,
yeah.
yeah. But the application, I mean, that should just be an administrative thing, right? You know,
Well, I approached Charlie about changing the zoning application. He was not comfortable with doing it without like a public hearing. Like, he wasn't sure what the
Oh.
process necessary.
oh.
But if you
I-
changed it in the zoning ordinance, then I think you could change the application because it relates exactly to that.
Yeah.
I looked up a butter this afternoon for New Hampshire. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I have the RSA right here.
Yeah,
The actual RSA, and I'll send everybody the email. We had just discussed at the last meeting, the three of us having
Yeah,
a thing about it. But yeah, there's like, RSA 6723 is the definition of a butter. It's very clearly pointed out. So,
Yes, yeah.
absolutely. And that language is used in the site and subdivision regulations.
But it doesn't
So
say a distance, though.
no, it does not.
Yep,
At one point, it did, but when it was last
for reach change, right?
amended, it went to the current definition, because I did a little research on the history of it, why our applications might have those distances. And past versions of that definition from the state were inclusive of the
Yeah.
footage.
So we just haven't kept up with
Right,
the application.
right.
So can we include a distance and still be?
That I don't know. I don't know if we would be.
I think,
Couldn't we? I mean,
I think we can,
and just keep it consistent though.
yes.